with a name that starts with a Z, I'm used to speaking last. No, please don't. Then you'll throw me off completely, you know. And actually, having done programs with my friend Ken Goldberg in the past, I have some idea of some of the things he's going to say. And the very interesting remarks of Jutta, whose last name I'm going to try not to pronounce. You know, I know why she's interested in Michigan is because you can see Michigan from across from Ontario. And I wanted to say something different, or at least build on what they're saying. We're running a program here which we call Work in an Era of Intelligent Tools and Systems, WITS. Keep your wits about you while these changes are taking place. And I think some of what we really know is very clear, which is these tools are going to permeate the way work is organized. They're going to permeate the economy over the next years. What we don't know is they're going to create some jobs, destroy some jobs, and transform most jobs. But what we don't know is what, when, and how. Now, the good news about not knowing what, when, and how is can we shape and deploy those tools? That's really what Ken and Jutta are really suggesting, is that that's really the core challenge. How do we do that? How do we do that for the community as a whole and for diverse and different kinds of communities? Now, that said, I wanted to sort of approach this from a slightly different angle. Ken has approached it from the core angle of what is the technology, Jutta from the vantage of how do we define communities that will be benefited and use these technologies. And I want to suggest that one way, a crucial issue, is how do we generate demand for the kinds of tools we might want? How do we generate that in the economy? Because unless there's a demand broadly in the economy, people don't invest in the kinds of tools, they don't start developing those tools, they don't get deployed. So I wanted to use 3 examples out of actual industry. Industry isn't necessarily the enemy, is the point. That in fact suggest ways in which these demands can in fact generate solutions that we might all advocate. Let's take the issue of aging. We know that the communities are aging. One issue, of course, is what do you do to take care of elderly people? How do you solve those kinds of problems? A different issue in economies like Japan is, you know, you don't have enough workers anymore. It's not an issue of skills or not skills. It's a matter of you just don't have enough experienced workers. So I'm going to name the company in the end here, but there's a particular Japanese company that, confronted with that specific problem, has said to itself, how do we use AI tools to try and have less experienced workers? Notice they don't use the term less skilled. They use the term less experienced workers, be able to act in situations like more experienced workers. Now, you could in fact say people with some disabilities to be able to act in circumstances like workers that in fact don't have those disabilities. It's an easily interchangeable notion in that circumstance. And so what they have done is, in fact, interestingly, teamed up with Berkeley and are putting people, researchers here, to try and solve that problem, so that in fact their very complex major construction tools in fact can be run, and they can train people along the way, and they don't have to wait 25 years for them to develop the experience to use a construction tool that could in fact destroy the building it's working at. It's a company called Komatsu. Okay, so the second example is the Komatsu that actually believes in social services and believes in, you know, trying to invest in its community, had noticed that there's a serious problem, which is that in a lot of Japanese rice farms were going out of business, which meant partly because some of the workers couldn't do some of the work. You know, you have to plant the rice by hand in the water. And that's really a difficult task, and that had become a fairly major social problem. Well, they noticed that in fact the question was, why do you have to plant by hand into the earth? And the answer is because if the earth is at all uneven, since rice has to be submerged, it'll just the seeds just wash away. The only circumstances in which you don't have that problem is if the seeds, if the ground is absolutely perfectly flat. Well, using drone tools and using various AI tools and their own technologies, they have now started to implement originally as a public offering, solutions to try and solve the problem, which in fact turns out to increase the rice productivity 40%, means that many farmers can stay on their land longer, and it's another way of addressing the aging problem. For them, it was a discovery. They're going to turn it into a business, which is fine. I mean, it basically is we're going to sell these tools more broadly to agricultural collectives, because it's not individual small farmers that are going to do it. You're going to have to create agricultural collectives to try and do it. Now, someone here at Berkeley, David Lindemann, who is back here and is going to be running the session, the next session, in fact, has pointed out that we can team up with Komatsu at this point and build a general set of strategies for addressing aging populations. So in fact, combining these issues of multiplicity, the issues of diversity, design, and the like, one can come at this in a variety of different ways. One last instance of this where in fact the solution is how do you in fact use the processes of the marketplace to accomplish things that you might not otherwise expect, is this issue of privacy. Amazingly, or to some people it was, if I hadn't thought about it, that for many small and middle-sized companies, company data privacy is absolutely essential. Let's say you own a small machine tool company, and you come along and you want to put your machine tool in a Siemens or a General Electric platform. Well, who owns the data? Who owns the algorithm? In fact, under those circumstances, your fear is that Siemens is going to come along and build the same kind of tool, just like Amazon comes along and basically says, what's being sold on our platform, can we go into business and compete with those people who are on our platform? Well, as a result, one of the people out of ThyssenKrupp in Germany who had helped build the idea of Industry 4.0, how to build a better digital future, is creating something called the Industrial Data Spaces Association, with the idea precisely of how do you insulate corporate data, try and protect it, so that you can put it into platforms that allow firms to collaborate. I pointed out to him the first time I'd heard this at a meeting in Munich, that in fact, if he could solve that problem, why didn't he just come to California and we could do a startup together and use it for personal data? Okay, now I was joking, but he's in fact now said in the actual proposal for ISDA, which is off the ground, a label in it is maybe we can use this for personal data. So what I'm really suggesting is starting with the reality of multiplicity, starting with the reality of needing to design for diverse communities, we in fact should also be looking for the character of demand in the market that can help drive these things into reality faster. Thank you.